One of the many theories behind the collapse and eventual takeover of the British motor industry, more specifically the companies that survived the Great British Leyland collapse, is that of foreign interference. One is infiltration by the Soviet Union to destabilise the Great British machine. The other is of greedy businessmen giving away designs and talent to the Japanese, such as the A40 and Hillman Minx, that Japan gained in the late 1950s, helping cement them as a car-making superpower. In this two-part video, I will explore both theories, which have echoed through history to the present day, appearing in comments, discussions and articles online. In this video, we will cover if BMC and British Leyland really did give away their future by letting Japan copy our cars to eventually beat us at our own game, leading to one of the most spectacular falls in motoring history. The answer to this question and this theory may shock you, that it did actually happen, but not in the way you may think. This is the story of how British Leyland gave away their own future, leading to Japan becoming one of the leading manufacturers in the world by market share, and British Leyland, once the 5th largest car company, becoming, even in spite of its successes, a disaster. Hello everybody and welcome to this video. If you're not subscribed already, please make sure to do so. It really does help me out and you get to see more of this. More history videos, more cars and conversions uncovered, and more projects like my Ford Cortina and my Rover SD1. This video is about one of the many theories about British Leyland, roots, and the whole of the British car industry's collapse in the 70s. And did we really give it all away to the Japanese? Let me know your opinion in the comments below. What do you really think killed the British car industry in the 1970s? So without further delay, let's get into this video on whether the British car industry really did give away their own future. Japan and its native car companies is attributed to be the main country responsible for the foreign car invasion of the 20th century and was instrumental in the collapse of BL's market share in the 70s. First, it's important we understand how the fate of British and Japanese car companies intertwined in the 20th century, leading one country's industry to rise in the 70s and the others to fall. After World War II, the occupation forces began rebuilding factories in Japan, such as the Nissan factory in Yokohama. The then president of Nissan, Ashihara, would approach the Austin Motor Company. The Japanese had a problem. After World War II, Nissan was too cash-strapped to develop new models. The reason why Austin was chosen was a simple one. Austins had already proven themselves in Japan. These cars had already made an appearance, with around 1,000 imported. These cars had proven themselves to be hardy and reliable, especially on Japan's currently unforgiving roads. This would lead to a deal to produce the Austin A40 Somerset in Japan, shipped over from the UK in knockdown kits. The A40 would be an incredible success for Nissan, with the production techniques and technologies learned directly going into the Nissan Cedric of 1960. Around the same time, another car company would partner with Roots Group, Isuzu. This would be a partnership to produce the Hillman Minx, with a 5-year technology sharing agreement. This agreement would come with benefits for Isuzu and financial ones for Roots, but the two main ones were: Isuzu would receive the sole rights to import all types of vehicles made by Roots. Isuzu would acquire the right to build the Hillman Minx and comma delivery vans, beginning with knockdown kit assembly and then moving to domestic production. These agreements were good for all parties, Roots in the short term, but Isuzu in the long term. And the same would go for the agreement between BMC and Nissan. Roots and BMC, two of the largest manufacturers in the UK, got access to the emerging Japanese car market and a small financial gain. Nissan and Isuzu got the technology and modern cars they desperately needed. The results speak for themselves. By 1950, Nissan had produced 865 cars, but after the help of Austin to set up the factories, as well as the technology sharing agreement, production rose to over 66,000 by the end of the decade. The A50 was next to be produced in Japan in its saloon and estate versions. Another important piece of technology would then be given to the Japanese in 1956, the B-Series engine. All of the tooling and machinery needed would be transferred from Longbridge to Japan. These engines would be rebadged and renamed with minor improvements. This would be one of Nissan's first forays into engine design. This was a turning point for both the Japanese and British car industries. At this point, the Japanese companies had learned modern technology and manufacturing techniques from the British, including car building and engine design. All they needed now was the resources to execute their plans. They would build these up slowly through the sales of these licensed models, such as the A40 and A50. In the UK, the motor industry was doing well, but the cracks were beginning to appear. In the new decade of the 60s, the first major strike would occur. This would begin with 55 electricians bringing a branch factory to a halt, leaving more than 24,000 BMC workers unable to do their jobs. Japan, even with its love of the British car and industry at the time, would cut ties and would start developing their own cars, while the British industry lay paralysed by itself, for one reason or another, while the Japanese were hard at work. At this point, a foreign invasion loomed, but Japan's first attempt in 1965 had been a disaster. The Daihatsu Compagno. This car was absolutely terrible, with a 50 mph top speed and a lack of brand representation, and the fact it was a badly executed rip-off of the Fiat 1800. Daihatsu was one thing, but Nissan didn't need to copy. They already had the technological know-how thanks to their British partnerships and their own ingenuity. 3 years after the first Japanese car made it to UK shores, British Leyland would be formed, creating one of the largest car companies to ever exist. One of the simplest explanations of BL is safety in numbers. The Japanese car invasion was on the horizon, industry analysts warned, and only the strongest and largest British car companies would survive, leading to the creation of one of the biggest to ever exist. The eve of this invasion would grow closer each year. 1971 marked a turning point. While the British industry was warring with itself, The Guardian would report something that would send shockwaves through British Leyland. BL executive Mr. W.H. Davis would issue a stark warning. 2 Japanese cars he had examined had become so good that they were very competitive with British models. He would not name the 2 cars. Meanwhile, even with this story in the headlines, 2,000 workers in Coventry would be idle at the Triumph plant. Another dispute at Longbridge would cost BL production of its biggest seller for a week, the Mini, losing the company around £2.5 million. 6,000 workers would then be laid off, stoking the fire further. Industrial relations were really at a low point. Lord Stokes would issue the same warning in October of that year, warning all of the firm's 180,000 workers that Japanese car makers were plotting an attack, concentrated on the UK. At the time, there was a boom in car sales. Japan was readying the Datsun, its Cherry and its Sunny models, as well as its 260c saloon. British Leyland at the same time were ready with their Marina, a competitive offering compared with the Japanese cars, but there was a problem. A strike at Cowley, where the Marina was made, would cause production again to be halted. The launch of the new car was again hampered by strike action. Build quality issues would arise with the Marina. A lack of being able to get them out the door fast enough was another issue. The Marina in its crucial year of 1971 could not meet the demand, leaving the rest of the market for the new Datsuns to soak up. This was perfectly summarised by Lord Stokes in a stark warning. They are going to have a go at Europe and this country. They must all laugh like drains when they see us going on strike, because they have the opportunity to sell more to our domestic customers. People will not wait. They have got the money in their pockets to meet the pent-up demand, which has been released by the July measures for whatever is in the shops. We are finding overseas particularly that people will not wait for our cars, and if our distributors cannot get them from us, they will seek other suppliers. With the Japanese cars now flooding the UK, the car buyer needed to get around, and Datsun as well as many other Japanese marques were happy to take their money. 6,000 Datsun Cherries would sell in 1971, demand would increase and over 30,000 would sell the next year. Sales would peak in 1973 with 60,000 that year. Even though these numbers sound impressive, they were merely the seeds of success, and slightly behind BL with the Marinas that actually managed to make it out the door. The word of Datsun was spreading, however, with 78% of those surveyed at the time saying they would repurchase another Datsun. The word of British Leyland was spreading as well. It was being slammed in the press as usual, no thanks to its earlier troubles. Even though in 1973 it was at its peak, it was under the microscope, something that all of its associated brands would have to endure for the rest of their existence. The Cherry and its counterparts allowed Datsun to gain a foothold in the UK market, which is something it desperately needed. While Datsun was ramping up, BL was slowing down. Their output fell with even more strikes, unrest, decaying machinery, and due to the lack of investment and poor management also compounding the strike action and the press bearing down, BL was in a crisis. The UK had also joined the EEC, wounding the British car industry further with even more cheap models. Car production had crashed from 1.92 million to 888,000. Datsun would become the largest foreign car maker by market share, all the while BL was declining. This would finally culminate in the collapse and bankruptcy of British Leyland in 1975. But an old friend turned rival would turn friend again. The Japanese public were and still are very fond of British cars, even leading to the mass exodus of ADO 16s in the 1990s due to the demand in Japan. A partnership between BL and Honda would be signed in Tokyo, Japan. This would produce several new models. First, it would create the Triumph Acclaim, allowing Honda to produce cars in the UK, gaining a much needed manufacturing foothold. This relationship would continue until the late 90s, with the Rover 800 in 1985 developed with Honda. This would allow Honda to produce the Acura Legend or Honda Legend, giving it a much needed executive car. This collaboration would produce other cars as well, the Rover 600 based on the Honda Accord, the Rover 200 and 400 based on the Honda Civic, as well as the later 25 and 45. Honda and its technology agreement sharing with Austin Rover had given both parties what they needed. It helped Austin Rover in the short to medium term, but it helped build the foundation for Honda in the long term. Honda, Nissan and Toyota would establish factories and an even bigger foothold thanks to their cars being produced in the UK. MG Rover, the remnants of BL, would collapse in 2005. It would, according to government reports, be less than half as efficient as Nissan, the largest manufacturer in the UK for a decade, with 34 cars per employee as opposed to Nissan's 98. Nissan, Honda and Toyota dominated the UK's car manufacturing landscape until 2021, when a second act would occur. Jaguar Land Rover would overtake Nissan to become the largest producer of cars in the UK, which it still is today. In summary, the rumour of talent and design being given away is false. The conclusion I have drawn from my research is that thanks to the industry turmoil and lack of opportunities seized, British Leyland sealed its own fate by inaction, allowing Japanese car giants to take the lead. British Leyland and its later reincarnations thought short term, while the Japanese companies were in it for the long game. If you'd like to know the full story behind the collaboration between Honda and BL, an amazing book has just been released, The Viking and the Samurai, linked below. What is your opinion on BL's tie-in with the Japanese? Let me know in the comments below. But as always, thank you for watching, keep watching and remember to subscribe for more of this, and I'll see you in the next one.